So thank you for coming along to our Autumn BEI Talks session. As Isabel's already said, I head up the newly set up Centre for Professional Development in the School of Business, Economics and Informatics. And as part of our activities within the centre, we host and lead a series of important conversations about timely matters. Many of these discussions are centred on current societal challenges, and we hope to ensure that there is an exchange of knowledge and insights between BEI and our wider society. So on this Thursday lunchtime, I am sitting here reminiscing about the bank holiday weekends over the summer. I'm pretty much sure that many of us on this webinar talk would welcome more such 4-day work weeks and are looking forward to hearing from our guest speaker today, Dr. Pedro Gomes, as to why he thinks the time is ripe, and importantly, how we can actually implement this. As a bonus, he's also agreed to draw up some broad guidelines as to how our institution, Birkbeck, University of London, will be able to trial this. So I'm terribly excited. So Pedro Gomes is an academic economist at Birkbeck, University of London. He received his PhD from the London School of Economics in 2010. A leading researcher on public sector employment, he has published numerous articles in peer-reviewed journals and in books. Pedro values partnerships with policy institutions and has presented his work at the National Banks of Portugal, Spain, France, and England, as well as the World Bank, European Central Bank, and the OECD. Pedro recently published his first book, Friday is a New Saturday, of which this talk is centered on, and has received glowing reviews from the Telegraph, Guardian, and various other broadsheets. So he's here to talk to us after having spoken at Amazon and the IMF. As his colleague, I'm honored to have him speak with us here and share his views. So over to you, Pedro.
Thank you, Pam. Let me share. So I hope you can all see. So thank you very much for your words. Thank you for being here. So this talk is about the 4-day working week. And as an idea, it arouses general sympathy, but very often it's portrayed as being harmful to the economy. So we would all be happier, but the economy will be the price to pay for the good life. In my book, I want to challenge this narrative and explain why the 4-day work week will actually improve rather than harm our economies. So I'm going to start with the words of one of the most renowned modern economists, and he wrote, "Progress comes from technical invention, and we shall ever be grateful to the discoverer of fire, the inventor of the electric dynamo, and the perfecter of hollandaise sauce. But there are also momentous social inventions. Indeed, as society becomes more affluent, these may become increasingly vital. The 4-day week is precisely such a social invention." The economist who wrote these words was no other than Paul Samuelson. Paul Samuelson is considered unanimously by economists as the father of modern economics. He won the Nobel Prize in 1970, and in that same year, he wrote a foreword of a book called 4 Days, 40 Hours. The book was a collection of management articles about this radical new management practice called the 4-day week, at the time implemented in the US by more than 30 firms, so what was called the compressed work week, or the 440, 40 hours in 4 days. Paul Samuelson, probably the greatest of the modern economists, called the 4-day week a momentous social invention, compared it to language. This is exactly my take about my view of the 4-day working week. I view it not as a partisan policy or a win for the labor movement, but as a social innovation, a better way to organize economic activity in the 21st century. Now, we have to start with a very important distinction. The book in the 1970s and most of the news that you hear about are about the 4-day work week as a management practice implemented by firms to improve their businesses. So the firms that have experimented with a 4-day work week find that workers come more refreshed, they are more productive, better problem solving, more innovative. They also make fewer mistakes and errors, and it reduces absenteeism and turnover with all the associated costs, and overall it makes the business better. This is different from what I propose. I propose it as what economists call a macroeconomic policy, a top-down policy implemented to the entire economy through legislation, giving a period of 4 to 6 years for everyone in the economy to adjust. And the idea is very simple, is to coordinate all the economic activity that we currently do over the week in offices, in universities, in banks, stock market, coordinated over 4 days, Monday to Thursday, coordinate all economic activity that currently occurs over the weekend, Friday to Sunday. And there's a lot of economic activity that occurs continuously in the economy. So some key services, hospitals, but also hotels, restaurants, pubs, these would still be conducted over 7 days, but the standard work week for workers would be only 4. And when we talk about the management practice, the benefits of the 4-day work week stay within the firm and the worker. I think the wider benefits to society and to the economy comes exactly by this coordination of everyone coordinating on this 4+3. Now, I know the first time you think about this, it just looks alien, looks unnatural, because we are so used to this, to the 5+2. But there's really nothing, when you think about it, nothing biological or theological or astrological about working 5 days. The work week is a social, political, economic construct. In the 19th century, people worked 6 days and rested on Sundays. And it was in 1908 that in the US, the first firm started implementing this radical and new management practice called the 5-day work week. So the movement got a big boost when Henry Ford, one of the greatest entrepreneurs of all time, implemented the 5-day work week as a management practice in all his factories in 1926. So he showed that it could be done in a large scale, but still by 29, only 5% of the workforce was in a 5-day work week. It moved from this microeconomic management practice to the macroeconomy in June 1938 with the approval of the Fair Labor Standards Act, a key part of the New Deal. And it didn't apply to all firms in the economy. It started only with firms doing interstate commerce, so larger firms, but gave them 2 years to implement the 5-day, 40-hour week that started becoming the standard. Then the Fair Labor Standards Act was expanded in the 40s, 50s, and 60s to reach other corners of the economy. Now, what is interesting about studying this is that the criticisms that you hear now about the 4-day work week are exactly the same as the criticisms that you hear then about the 5-day work week. In 1936, Harold Moulton, he was the president of the Brookings Institute, an influential think tank in the US, he wrote, "A shorter work week would prove nothing short of a calamity to the wage earners of this country," which is very similar to what you read in the pages of the Telegraph now. If any government were crazy enough to try it, it would simply turn the deep recession we already face into a complete catastrophe, calamity. So the criticisms are the same. Now, what is really, really surprising is that all these criticisms of the 5-day work week, they disappeared once it was implemented. They really disappeared. No one wanted to go back to this having a week of 6 days. And not only that, the critics disappeared and they gave rise to the first visionaries of the 4-day work week. The most notable was in 1956, the Republican Vice President Richard Nixon, that said the 4-day working week would be coming soon. Why? Why did the critics disappear and gave rise to the first visionaries? Because people realized once it was implemented that the 5-day work week was a better way to organize the economic activity in the 20th century. And it's very clear to me now, that's what I'm trying to, the point I'm trying to make with the book. It's very clear that now a 4-day work week is a better way to organize economic activity in the 21st century. Think about it. In 80 years, everything in societies have changed. The technology we use, the jobs we do, the speed in which we communicate, demographics, the length of our lives, the number of years that we study, the structure of the family, the nature of our social interactions, everything changed. And we still think that 5 is that magical number as if it was a mathematical constant. So I'm going to organize my arguments into 8 powerful economic reasons to show that the 4-day workweek is a better way to organize economic activity in the 21st century. And I'm going to enlist the help of 4 of the greatest political economists in history, each one torchbearer of particular and opposing ideologies, to help me explain the mechanisms of why the 4-day workweek will improve the economy. So under John Maynard Keynes, reason number 1, because it's possible. And reason number 2, because it will fuel the economy through the demand for leisure industries. To consume, we need money, but we also need time. It's in our free time that we feel our needs. And it's on free time that we tend to spend more in industries like entertainment, culture, tourism. All these industries will benefit from a 4-day workweek. Joseph Schumpeter, he's called the prophet of innovation. Reason number 3, because it will increase productivity. This is why firms are implementing the 4-day workweek as a management practice, because it makes their businesses more productive. But also reason number 4, because it will unleash the potential of a vast talent pool of innovators. The seeds of the deepest innovation is not planted with money, it's planted with time. The greatest of examples is again Henry Ford. He constructed his first car with an internal combustion engine during 3 years while having a 6-day week job in one of Thomas Edison's electricity power plants. He worked every night and all of Saturday night in his car. He became Henry Ford, not because of what he did in his day job, but what he did during his leisure time. And like him, countless number of entrepreneurs, inventors, writers, artists that had a day job, but really their passion was worked on during their leisure time, and ultimately that's why they became known, and that's when they greatly contributed to society and to the economy. Karl Marx, reason number 5, because it will reduce technological unemployment, the unemployment that arises from the adoption of labor-saving technologies, automation. And reason number 6, because it will raise wages and reduce inequality. And then finally, Friedrich von Hayek, one of the greatest figures of classical liberalism, reason number 7, because it will give people more freedom to choose what to do with their time. People will be freer to work more under a 4-day working week than they are currently free to work less under a 5-day work week. And reason number 8, because it will reconcile a polarized society and crush populist movements that pose the biggest downside risk to our economies. Now, these economists, they would disagree on many things. They each view the economy in a different way. They each viewed what was important in a different way. They are all torchbearers of particular and different ideologies. But that's exactly my view as a social innovation, is that whether you are liberal or conservative or progressive or Marxist, there will be reasons that will speak to you. I really, really believe that we can unite behind this idea. Now, I try to make the case, so I make the case that the 4-day work week is a better way to organize economic activity in the 21st century, but then we have to weigh these benefits of the 4-day working week with the costs of implementing it. It's naturally that there are costs of implementing the 4-day work week because of the disruption that would cause of doing things differently from what we currently do. But I think even those costs of implementation are much smaller than what people make it out to be. Let's just start with this idea, and it's really accounting. It's one view that if workers only work 80%, they have to have a 20% wage cut, or otherwise firms cannot survive. So this is one form of adjustment. It actually has a name. It's part-time. Most of part-time contracts would go to 80% with a proportional wage cuts. And this is already accepted by 25% of workers in the UK that are working part-time. In Netherlands, for instance, it's half of workers are on part-time contracts, 60 or 80%. But this is one form of adjustment. And in the book, I discuss in total eight. So this is only one form of adjustment. We shouldn't be too tied up to this, because there are 8 different ways of doing it, and a combination of them. The most important that I would want to point is that time itself is an adjustment. And this, I think, if you take something from this talk, economies are not static, they are dynamic. And even prior to the pandemic, wages in the UK were growing at 4% a year. They are currently growing probably even faster that rate right now. If you think that firms and workers can negotiate no wage increases the year prior and the year after the implementation, this already takes care of 8 percentage points out of the 20 percentage points necessary without any wage cuts, just reducing the pace of wage growth. If you think about firms and workers agreeing on, over a period of 5 years, give 1 extra Friday per month for each of the year instead of wage increases, the firms would have implemented the 4-day work week over the period of 5 years. But even this is, it might not be necessary, because there are these large increases in productivity and reduction in costs that firms have experimented with the 4-day work week find. Now, it might not happen to all occupations. Some occupations, the gains in productivity might be smaller, but there are other ways. If you increase half an hour or 1 hour in the remaining days, that already takes care of 1/4 to 1/2 of the adjustment needed, and it could be increases in prices, reduction, oversized profits, or government subsidies. There are, the point is that one size does not fit all. There shouldn't be just one form of adjustment. We should use a combination that's more suitable for the type of job that we are talking about, and it should be different if you are a journalist, if you are a university professor, if you are an engineer in an offshore platform. But there is this portfolio gives a lot of possibilities of making adjustment to make it less disruptive. Now let's think about this concrete case about Birkbeck. Now, if before thinking about implementation, I want to say that actually the 4-day week aligns perfectly with Birkbeck's mission. One of the arguments is that for the 4-day work week to reduce technological unemployment is because it will give time for people that are in declining occupations. They will have time to retrain into a more profitable occupation. And this is really Birkbeck's mission. So I think even from the conceptual point of view, the mission of Birkbeck, it's perfectly aligned with the 4-day work week. Now, when we think about implementation, I understand that in many industries it might be easy, it might be harder, but if there is one industry in which is straightforward implementation, is the higher education, especially after the current shift to online teaching. Because our core business is really teaching. And we can just concentrate lectures Monday to Thursday, and students would have Friday and Sunday to catch up on asynchronous material, especially after the big shift that we had in the past 2 years. Of course, other business areas of the university, there will have to be a readjustment, and it's not necessarily straightforward. But when you think about the core business, it's just very, very straightforward to concentrate the lectures over Monday to Thursday. And I think this is a very important point. if you, like me, work in the higher education industry, you know that in the last 2 years have been exhausting. You talk to administrators, you talk to faculty, overwork, burnout, stress are becoming common also among our staff. And if you hear the news, you'll hear a lot about the great resignations happening in the US, but it's also starting here in the UK. And it's really a great resignation is also possible in higher education. And this is a huge loss when you have people just leaving the companies or the institution because it's a loss of human capital. And the institutions that can preempt this by offering better conditions will have a strategic advantage because they'll be able to retain their staff. This is one of the benefits that firms have found. And I think it's more than offering higher wages. I think there is a much bigger gain of offering better conditions in terms of the 4-day week. So I would stop here, and I would start with the questions.
Thank you, Pedro. So I have a couple of questions, and then when I'm sure the rest of you are desperate to ask some questions as well. So I'll start with one, and then as I see Neil Ten's already up, I'll start with one question, and then I'll open up to the floor. Those of you who want to ask your questions, put your hand up. Otherwise, you can put it in the chat, and we will be sort of monitoring the chat. Okay, so I guess I was intrigued when I read your book, and my question is, what inspired you on this 4-day week journey? You know, personally, and also obviously from a research point of view, if I may ask.
Yeah. So the book really started in end of November 2019. When there were the elections for the parliament, and the Labour Party ran partially on the idea of the 4-day work week, and I thought this is a great idea. But then the arguments that were made, I wasn't. I thought they could be made better. So the argument was this philosophical argument about happiness. So we should work to live, not live to work. And there are more important things, and the happiness and the value of leisure by itself. And this sort of argument, which I buy personally, I do view it, and probably the fact that I'm in higher education probably, and I didn't go to finance in the city probably reflects that personal view. But then it comes to a very clear. The economy would be in that narrative. The economy is something that we have to sacrifice to have this happiness, and then it puts the debate in a very opaque way, because some people might not value this leisure, and then you have something that it's very hard to quantify. What's the value of this leisure with something that, a sacrifice that people talk about? And I thought, no, the 4-day work week will benefit the economy, what we do in our leisure time. And I think that's the error of the argument, is to think that in our leisure time it's kind of a happy chamber where we just go in, we don't interfere on anything else in the economy, and then we come out happy. But every leisure act has an economic payoff to someone, said James Tobin, a Nobel Prize winner. And then it started my journey doing the research. And what I find most inspiring was really going back to history and all the movement from 6 to 5, and seeing the same arguments just repeated.
Okay, brilliant. So Neil had his hand up, and I see there's a message in the chat. But Neil, would you like to ask a question?
Yeah, hi. Thanks for that. Yeah, it's a fantastic idea. My question's about the education system. So what would be the implication of a national 4-day week for the education system? Because presumably that would mean that there would be 20% less time to cover the curriculum in schools, which implies either a fundamentally different way of teaching or a fundamental reform of the curriculum. So have you? What? How does the education system sort of fit into the proposal that you're making?
Yeah, thank you. So I do have one chapter dedicated to implementation in the public sector. So I talk about the wider implementation in public sector, and I talk specifically about the education. Although, so in terms of higher education, I really think it's straightforward. The implementation. You would teach Monday to Thursdays, just concentrating, and I think in the core business it wouldn't change. Now you could be a bit more worried about primary education or secondary education. Now the 4-day school week is not something. It's not new. It's implemented in the US in many rural areas as a way to reduce costs and increase recruitment. And the evidence that exists, it doesn't really point to a worsening of results. In France, for instance, they historically have moved from the primary teaching from the 5 to the 4 and back to the 5 and now back to the 4. So now the majority in France is they don't have Wednesday, they have Wednesday off. And it was accompanied by a plan called the Plan Mercredi, where the students would go to a planetarium, a farm, and they would do sports, they would do other activities. Now, I do think it's doable. You can do some forms of adjustment, maybe half an hour more in the remaining days. You can think about adjusting the length of the summer holidays or the half term, but I think mainly is trying to incorporate more online material. So I'm not an education expert, so in this part I can't really give you very, very concrete, but just thinking about the government, the Department for Education doing videos that would be common to all students in the UK, that would be accompanied by quizzes where they would have to do, where the Department for Education could monitor schools. You could very well compensate the reduction of 1 day. You can also do it for different, adding more hours or extending. So the point is, if we give 4 to 6 years for the implementation, and clearly the schools would be one of the last things to move. I think there's plenty of time to redesign the system around the 4-day school week.
Brilliant, thank you. Neil, do you want to say anything more, or shall we go on to the chat questions? Yeah,
no, that's fine.
Brilliant.
Thank you.
Yeah, welcome more questions from you, of course. So there's a comment from Heidi. I hope I pronounced that correctly. They say the idea is great and could work really well for the sectors you mentioned, example, journalism, HE engineers. How can we support workers in the entertainment and leisure industries who are often overworked and underpaid already to have 4-day work weeks? If office workers have more leisure time, those working in leisure will inevitably work more.
So that's it's not that they will inevitably work more. There will be more people will be hired for these sectors. That's one of the benefits. Is if with a 4-day week, you'll have this increasing demand for leisure industries, restaurants, and restaurants, all the entertainment culture, and it's exactly by increasing demand that will push their wages up, and they will create more employment opportunities. So, and I think this is really a big effect. When after the Fair Labor Standards Act in the 40s, you saw that in the 1938 implemented first in the 40s. You'll see that the 40s there was the birth of a lot of the multinationals. In restaurant business, so McDonald's or Best Western in hotels, Estee Lauder in cosmetics, or the biggest sports chain in the US started as a fishing shop. These are all these multinationals were created to satisfy the demand for related to having more free time. The same in China. They implemented the 5-day work week only in 1995, and it's just they have a boom in their domestic tourism market, with all the building all this infrastructure of sports infrastructure or cultural infrastructure. So this would kind of the boom that we would expect. They would only benefit. People that work in these industries, they would only benefit from these increasing demand.
I'm already planning what to do for my next 4-day work week. The next question comes from Andy. If it slows the rate of increase in the tax base, won't it make it harder to fund growing demand for public services? And as an aside, I think he suggests that maybe it's not Friday, it's Monday that people hate.
Yeah. So it could be that Monday is the new Sunday.
Yeah, exactly. That's your sequel book, maybe.
I would say in 100 years. So we moved from 6 to 5, 80 years ago, and to 3 would come much later. But on between Monday and Friday, I wouldn't have a preference. Some people say it would be better on Wednesday because it would break the week, and then you would be recharged for the Thursday and Friday, and that I think that is true. But then that clashes because part of the effect comes from this agglomeration of the weekend. So people can go out on city breaks or go to Cornwall for the 3-day weekends. But in between Friday and Monday, I wouldn't really. If that was the only problem facing this proposal, I would not put my. I would happily concede on the Monday. In terms of the tax base, it just fall. So again, it's that view. If you have this view that by working less, the economy is going to fall because it's only about the amount of hours that you work, then you would have this. So the tax rate would also the tax base would fall. But my point is exactly that by the more leisure time would bring benefits to the economy, both in the short run in terms of increasing demand for leisure industries or increasing productivity or reduction of the unemployment rate, but also in the long run with more innovation, of having more entrepreneurs or more inventors that that explore their part-time to create something new. So both if you believe my view that there will be all these benefits to the economy, then the decline in the tax rate won't really be a problem. It won't happen.
Brilliant, thank you. Sajeda, again, apologies if I pronounced it wrongly. I believe they're a student of yours or of our institution. Please, could you expand on what you said about Marxist, Republican, liberal, populist groups coming together over the 4-day work week implementation?
So I mentioned conservatives, liberals, progressives, and Marxists. So the idea that economists disagree on everything. So you put 2 economists in the room, as Churchill said, and there will be 2 different opinions, unless one of them is Lord Keynes, where there will be 3 opinions running in the room. So we all disagree. We disagree on how the economy adjusts and what's important. So sometimes the debate of the 4-day week is not so much a debate about the idea itself. It's a debate among economists. It's a debate about schools of thought. One school of thought thinks that this is going to happen, and then someone else comes and says, I disagree on the mechanism. And it seems it's an opinion against the 4-day work week, but it's really an ideological or a discussion about how the economy works. So what I put myself in the book is I put myself in the shoes of Keynes, not really his theories, but how he viewed the economy. In Schumpeter, which is more what's called supply side driven, and from a liberal perspective, to try to make the arguments that would persuade them, that would speak to them. And I don't think that everyone, surely everyone, not all economists would agree with all of the arguments, but I think they encompass a large scope of ideologies, of views over the economy to find arguments that would speak to them. Yeah.
Brilliant, thank you. And the next question comes from Jonathan. Do you believe a move towards a 4-day working week comes hand in hand with rethinking our obsession with growth, or moving to a post-GDP world, at least in weird nations? Weird meaning the Western, educated, industrialized, rich and democratic. That's part one. And in part two, how feasible is your vision for non-weird nations?
Yes. So the first answer to your question is no, I don't think so. The 4-day work week actually has a lot of supporters amongst environmentalists, and they view it as a measure of degrowth. We scaling back production and reducing material consumption to save the environment. And in a way, environmentalists and economists think alike, because they think that just by reducing the amount of hours you work, you are going to scale down the economy. But this is precisely what I say, it won't happen. The 4-day week is not a measure of reducing consumption, is a measure for increasing consumption of what we really value. So I think talk about the green dividend of the 4-day week. You read some articles, for example, in the Financial Times this week related to COP26. And they say it's going to help reduce emissions. I'm very skeptical of that, because with a 3-day weekend, people might go on city breaks flying that pollutes. They might go to beaches and pollute the beaches. Barbecues burn coal. So I really don't think so. I really because I think it's going to improve the economy. I don't think this is a measure of degrowth. What I do think it can help a lot the environmental movement by bringing economic security to a large majority of the population. I think all the measures that we need to save the environment, when they'll actually be implemented, they will make fuel more expensive. They will make electricity more expensive. And if a large part of society are in precarious jobs, are unemployed, don't have any prospects, then they won't support these type of measures. If we bring economic security and prosperity to everyone, which I think the 4-day work week will, then it will give them this. It will help pave the way for the hard measures we need to save the environment. Regarding the non-weird nations, the Western, educated, industrialized, and rich, they would benefit. So you see that the movement to work less is in different phases in different countries. So China moved to the 5-day work week in '95. India is still on the 6-day week, although now the latest labor reform wants to facilitate for firms to do this 48 hours in 5 days or in 4 days, but they are still lagging. And I think they would benefit. So they would also benefit from implementing the 4-day working week in the developed countries, because one of the consequences, and this is one of the forms that firms will have to adjust to increase productivity, will be to increase automation, but also outsourcing. So it's very likely that after the implementation of the 4-day work week, some of the low value parts of the economic chain, let's say, in the developed countries would be outsourced to developing countries. In any case, the 4-day working week has been experimented in Chile or in Argentina. So the movement is a bit wider than just Europe and the US.
Great. And just to your comment about, if there are more than 2 economists in the room, they won't agree. I think there are lots of them on this chat. So yeah. Okay. So are there any questions? More questions? You obviously can raise your hand or write your question in the chat. In the meantime, whilst waiting, well, yes, someone's just said, I bet you worked 6 days a week to write the book.
So I don't. He's Andy Ross is my colleague here, and he would joke. And actually, I did. It's very hard for me to place the book. So I have many hobbies, or I had in my from triathlon to chess to dancing or gardening. But this book, it's very hard to place whether it's leisure or work, because it's really written for a general audience, and economists don't really write books anymore. They write papers that tend to be much more focused, much more precise questions, rather than building narratives. So actually, I took the book more as a leisure, as something I wouldn't normally do over work. Of course, there's spillovers because I'm an academic, and the voice in the book is a voice of an academic. So I hope I'll get some kind of benefits from my academic career, not necessarily among economists from the book, but I really see it as something I wouldn't normally do at work, and I really think about an achievement kind of outside work.
Okay, thank you. Next question from Bonnie, who I think has a student email. How do you see the effects of the pandemic on remote working playing out with regards to the normal 5-day week?
Yeah. So what I think the pandemic just it kind of shifted a bit our mind, our frame of mind of how we think about work. Some people put this idea of flexible working versus the 4-day week as if one opposes the other, or they are somehow if you do one, you can't do the other. I think they go hand in hand. And I think that the remote working has some benefits, but it's also not a panacea for, it creates a lot of problems of coordination. So I do think what the pandemic did was show that the disruption cost of the 4-day work week, it's actually smaller than might have been 5 years ago, because now the status quo is broken. No, there's not a new normal. We are trying to still find a new normal. Is it 3 days in the office, 2 at home? When is it? Is it all together or not? We are looking for a new normal, and that disruption cost of implementing the 4-day work week would probably be much higher, 5 years ago than it is now, exactly because there is no normal anymore.
Thank you. Charles has a question. The standard story of a simple trade-off between income and leisure does not seem to fully explain historical development of the working week. There are identifiable periods where the working week declined and other contrasting periods where the working week hardly declined at all. The average working week does not simply decline due to individual choices in the labor market. The decline in average working hours observable over the last 150 years is not due to millions of individual choices in the labor market. Rather, it appears to be due to collective action, like unions, for example, and collective decisions to reduce the working week. So, any thoughts on this?
Yes. So I think you are absolutely right on the data. So the question is, who are the drivers, or who should be the drivers? And there's an argument from liberals that say, well, it should be individuals and firms making the decisions, the government shouldn't intervene. Actually, when you read Hayek, The Road to Serfdom, and Hayek was, the figure of economic liberalism, he says that the laissez-faire argument is not an argument to leave things as they are, and he attributes a role to the government, very limited. But one of the things he would say is that the government should legislate on working hours. It's one of the things, and this is the father of liberalism. So we don't want. So it's my view that the government needs. We need a nudge from the government, and so Charles talks more about the role of the unions. They have an important role as a pressure group. Ultimately, I see it as the government doing it through legislation. But we can't forget there's also this wing of inspiring and advanced managers and businessmen that did. So it's not just Henry Ford, but Robert Owen before him. So it's the interesting thing is that you have both unions and not any of the entrepreneurs, the best entrepreneurs, the most visionaries that actually do it. Now, when we think about being the government having to step in, the question is among economists is what is the market failure? So why do we need the government? Why can't the market just get there by itself? And really, the problem is a problem of coordination failure. So modern economic activity, our jobs, they are basically about teamwork. And it's much more now than it was 50 years ago because we've been specializing. And with specialization, you need more, bigger, teams, and you need this relation amongst co-workers. So I mentioned that 25% of UK workers are part-time. What does this mean for a company? When I'm not working on a Monday, my boss is not working on a Tuesday, my client is not working on a Wednesday, and my supplier is not working on a Thursday. It just creates problems of communication, of decision making, and it's exactly because of this, of the problems that we have of the switching off and the right to switch off, because when you are essential for a £10 million project and you are in your day off, but you are essential, you will be receiving calls, you will be receiving emails. Why? Because of this the importance of coordination of economic activity. And you see, it's important, this coordination, but so it makes it very hard to deviate and you still find 25% of the UK workers going into part-time. And usually sacrificing much more than 20% of wages because they sacrifice promotion opportunities because they seem as the slackers. And you still find firms implementing the 4-day week as a management practice. And if you see the main problems that they say, it's hard to satisfy the client on a Friday. And this is the idea of the coordination. But this is that's why we need the government to shift the coordination. So coordinate on 4 days, still giving the freedom for people to work more, moonlighting with a second job, doing the gig economy if they want to extra pay. But then essentially we need the government because this is a problem of coordination.
Great. Yeah, I was going to ask something about, who do you think should lead the change, the charge top down, bottom up, but we'll get to that in a second. Charles has a follow-up question. There are many ways to measure working time. We can count the average hours worked in a week or the average hours worked in the year. We can decide to only include full-time workers in our counts, but then we have to decide what the cutoff point is between full-time and part-time work. And this has changed over time in between countries. This variety of measurement means that we need to be careful when comparing changes over time and across countries to ensure that we're actually comparing like with like. If we look at changes in working week since the 1980s, what is notable is that there is no evidence that working hours have declined. However, if we look at annual hours instead of weekly hours, the picture changes. In Europe, there appears to be a clear working hour reduction, a reduction that is not evident in the US. Again, any thoughts on this anomaly?
So this is true. So when you plot the hours work, they would fall. sharply until the 40s, 40s and a bit later 50s, 60s, but then it stabilized in the US. When you look at annual hours or the average for workers, they still decline, but instead of being everyone, it's basically concentrated on a group, which is women. Women are the ones that go to part-time. So this movement towards working less, it's still there. It didn't stop even if there was no legislation. There is this individual movement, but it's just asymmetric and centered in women. In the UK, it's 40% of women work part-time. And when I say part-time, this is long part-time. So it's a 4-day week or a 3-day week, but with a stable employment in a firm. In Netherlands, it's 80%. And this is one chapter is about the impact on women and why they would benefit more from a 4-day week than men, exactly because of that, because they would put in equal footing in their job, because right now they are the ones that are going into to a part-time. Within the couple, it's the women that are withdrawing. By doing this top-down, you would have you would put men and women, at least in the labor market, in the equal footing, and at home it would give hours to the men to work than if you would do more home production or housework. Then that's a different question.
Well, I heard this morning on early morning radio that it's men. Today is men cooking day or something. So I don't know what you have prepped for dinner tonight, but hopefully something.
Well, my wife is a doctor, so I actually do most of the cooking at home.
Ah, brilliant.
So maybe I should invert today and ask her to cook.
Oh dear. Okay, so we have about 7 minutes left. I guess there were a couple of questions as to how, and I think you've alluded to that as to who or how should this change happen, or who should lead the charge. And you've indicated the government, and it's not just, I guess, this government or another government, but I guess governments in general. So there's the people who run a country or international boards. So could you share a little bit about that thought?
Well, yes. So I do think it has to be the government doing something similar to the Fair Labor Standards Act in the US in 38. And then the exact way in which it's implemented, then I think it should be left to different occupations and industries to find the best way to implement, whether it is if there's an adjustment in the hours in the following day, in the other days, whether they have to be no wage increases for 1 or 2 years, whether you force firms to take a cut in profits, and that is really sector specific, industry specific. So I think it should be the government setting targets, but then giving flexibility for firms and industries to negotiate and see. And you see, that's why I think we should give a period of 5 to 6 years or 4 to 6 years. It has to be binding, so it can't just be promises, because this is, you go through history since the 70s, or since Richard Nixon in 56, the 4-day working week will come soon. Andy Albain, the former chief economist at the Bank of England, said in 2050 we'll have a 4-day working week. So you can always think, but it has to be binding to change expectations. You have to approve it in Parliament and then put these milestones. And I think where you would start, you'd clearly start by multinationals. Multinationals, most of them have, even in terms of profits, ratio of profits to wages, just the ability to self-finance this investment. And you would start with them, and then you would put different milestones for different industries for different size of firms, and clearly agriculture will be one of the last, and small firms would be one of the last, and education would be one. I would say one of the last.
Okay. So whilst we're making, maybe some predictions, do you think it will happen in our lifetime? Assuming that, we still have 20, 30 years of work in us.
Yes. No. So I do think it will come. I think the movement that you see is getting momentum. It's you see Spain or Scotland having government-sponsored trials to implement it as a business, as a management practice. Now, I don't think it will come soon. I think that the leading candidates would be naturally US, Canada, UK, and Germany or France or the euro area as a whole. Now, UK has kind of left, unfortunately, this mainly because of Brexit, in the sense that I think it's kind of people are a bit tired of these very large changes, and the 4-day working week would be a big change, and so I think that I think kind of UK lost. It would be hard to get people behind it, although they love the idea, just because of what has been all this big process of Brexit and how kind of tiring it has been. So I would see it more likely coming from the US with this administration. They are kind of following the footsteps of Roosevelt and talking about the Green New Deal, and the Fair Labor Standards Act was a key part of the New Deal. There's actually a proposal now in Congress in the US, sponsored by the Democratic Congressman Mark Takano, to reduce the working hours, the weekly working hours, to 32. So there is the movement. I would see it coming more from the US or somewhere from France or Germany or the euro area as a whole, more than the UK, unfortunately.
Okay, right. Well, thank you very much, Pedro, for this really, really insightful and hopeful talk, I think. If we can benefit from it in our later years, that'd be great. But it sounds like hopefully our, the next generation, and those of you on this call who are, the next generation on, let's aim for a 4-day work week for the rest of your working journey. Pedro, sorry I interrupted.
No. I want to, thank you, and thanks everyone that's here. If you are at Birkbeck, you can pop by Waterstones, and I'll sign the book. I'll be there from 3 to 4.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Pedro. Thank you, Isabel. Thank you, everyone, for being here and listening to Insights. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.